Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to our second webinar of our business-friendly webinar series for Pathways to Prosperity. I am Tiffany Brewster. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility. Today's webinar on Business Friendly is doing a deep dive into public education. And of course, all of our work with the roundtables and all the information we've collected from businesses has been made possible by the Couch Family Foundation, the public education work, especially by Nellie Mae Education Foundation, and of course, New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. So big shout out and thank you to those really important funders and partners. So another thank you as well to our sponsors for this Pathways to Prosperity program and webinar series, Needham Bank and Kennebunk Savings Bank. Again, our amazing partners and really purpose-driven organizations, members of NHBSR that have generously sponsored the Pathways to Prosperity program. So, for those that are potentially new to New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility, we are a business membership association that is values aligned. And so that puts us in a really unique position for the work that we do. We convene, support, inspire, and lead. And so, what that looks like is bringing businesses together to support and move them from ideas to action, but also help deliver these best practices through shared storytelling and peer learning. And of course, we lead with our values. So we find that our members look to us to help bring those best practices and those values-driven purposes. So again, that puts us in a really unique position for the work that we're doing right now around this business-friendly narrative and thinking about public systems that help businesses to thrive in our communities. And so, what we're doing today, we want you to leave with an expanded definition of business friendly, very specifically in the public education space. We'll do a little review for those that weren't able to come to our first webinar where we went deep dive into defining business friendly. Today, we're going to define business friendly for public education. And so, we'll give you also some really important ways that you can act on that. So, this is the agenda for today. I'll get into a little bit about why, what happened, the process. And then we have a really wonderful voice here, Dave Finnerty from uh, Claremont Savings Bank, that will be talking about how the issue of public education shows up in their business. And then we'll really deep dive into the public education narrative and talk about, again, how you can take away with action. How we'll hope you engage today. Come as a peer, not as a spectator. We want you to join the conversation. Go ahead and jump in, raise your hand throughout the presentation. This is meant to be interactive. Use the chat anytime, disagree, agree, send reactions. We love all of those interactions. Again, it's okay to disagree. I had a funny experience at one of our events where I spoke with a legislator after, and he's like, I probably didn't make very many people happy. And I said, that's fine. This is what we're here for, is to have conversation and really lift up different voices and have a really productive conversation toward that end. Always speak from your own experience, of course. And if nothing else from today, I want you to leave with one thing that you can do and act on. So, the first thing, I have an activity to engage the folks in the room. I want to understand a little bit about who's here in the room before we get started. So, I know the taboo, leave your phone away, but if you need to use your phone, you can put in that QR code. I'm also going to put this link in the chat for you. And I apologize, I didn't have it up already. This is an interactive live poll. Here is the oops, nope, I made a typo. Don't use that link. Hold on. Here we go. So this is an interactive poll that will help. Uh, we'll be using it across the entire presentation, so you can leave it up. So when you click on that link or when you use the QR code, you'll be entered into a screen that might ask you for a password. The password is right here on the screen, 4JX2, also in the chat. And when you put that in, you can also you can choose to create an account, but if you scroll down a little more on that first screen, you can just enter as a guest. You can put an anonymous name or you can put your own name if you like, and then it will lead you right into this poll. So again, visit this website, put in the password, and then you can create an account or you can scroll down to where you can join as a guest or anonymously to help complete this poll. And so take your time getting set up here because we'll use this again throughout the website. So don't close the browser once you get in here. I see we've got one person in here. So uh, there, I put the link in the chat if you're looking to try and get to that link. I hope that link is working here. And if you can see my screen, I've clicked on the link, and so hopefully you can, it brings you to the website. And then you put that password in 4JX2, join. And here you see you can sign in with account, or if you, I thought you couldn't go in without a password. I guess you can't. Hmm. The mobile version allows you to do this anonymously. This one isn't allowing you to.
Not anymore. Even the mobile version requires sign in now.
Well, that's obnoxious. I'm sorry, you all, to have you create another account. That's totally cool if you don't want to create another account. Um, but we have some responses here. So thank you for those that went ahead and created an account. My apologies. You didn't used to need to create an account last week, and now you do. So we have a few people responding. We have a couple business members, some nonprofit, a few candidates for or elected officials already. Um, so thank you for filling out that poll. We have a few more responses and a few more people coming in. We'll have to work on a different poll situation for the next webinar. That's disappointing. All righty. There we are. So the next one, I'll actually just go ahead and ask you to put, if you're in, we'll move on to the next slide here. Maybe. Here we go. So feel free to put this, no worries if you can't create an account, not a problem. You can feel free to put your answers in the chat. Why don't we just do that for now so that folks don't have to mess with the creating an account. If you're in here and want to respond to it, then happy to have you respond to it. But we have a question for you here. Which three impacts of the public school system matter most to your ability to operate and make a profit? And so select up to three. If you're not a business owner, you can skip this, or you can take a guess at what most impacts you or your community. We have quality local schools that help attract and retain talent, work-ready graduates, CTE programs, career and technical education programs that produce job-ready graduates, student services that keep families here, school costs that don't drive up property taxes and wages, New Hampshire's reputation as a family-friendly place to live, and schools as community hubs that anchor retention. So I see a few responses here coming in, and feel free to add some, if you weren't able to get into this online system here, feel free to add your answers in the chat if you'd like. So we see a few on CTE programs, schools as community hubs, quality local schools, work ready grad CTE in the chat. This is great. This is echoing a lot of what we heard when we convened roundtables for businesses, quality local schools. Seems like quality local schools is ranking up there for a really important work ready and job ready. Let's see. There are CTE programs that so there are career and technical education programs that produce job-ready graduates, and then work-ready graduates probably should have been specified that we're talking about straight out of public school or maybe not a CTE program in New Hampshire. Okay. All right, we'll scoot on to the next slide here. Why this? Why now? Let's set some context about what it is that we're doing here. So we know and we've heard from businesses and convened businesses around the idea of public education and how it's impacting their business. But and what we've heard from them is a lot of concern around our public education system. And interestingly, in some of our engagement, we've seen really high engagement when we bring employers together to speak in person about it. And then when we ask businesses to speak about it, we've seen a little bit less engagement. So I think that the public, as parents and as community members, is really feeling the squeeze, and businesses are feeling the squeeze in different ways necessarily. So, but we do know that as in that poll previously just kind of pointed out, that quality public schools is really what attracts people to New Hampshire, especially young families, and it's really important to them. And when we don't have that, and what we've heard from business is that skilled workers are leaving. They're leaving to other places that can offer better schools and have maybe a more welcoming environment and have better services for their children that have specific needs that are not being met by the public schools. And when that happens, eventually, we might see businesses leave New Hampshire if they are feeling like the public systems aren't in place to support a robust workforce. And that really matters for New Hampshire because our business revenue is more than one-third of our state budget. And what that looks like is less opportunity for services in New Hampshire that support the robust workforce. So I was in an interesting conversation with a person the other day, a consultant, that looked at me and said, what? What is going to happen if we do nothing? What is really going to happen to the state of New Hampshire for a lot of things, but especially public education, if nothing changes and we keep on the trajectory that we're on? And we really see the impacts being pretty salient here. So let's talk a little bit about how we got here first. We started by listening. Our process was iterative. We got feedback at every stage. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that we've convened businesses, and we actually convened businesses earlier this year in 4 regional roundtables across the state in the Upper Valley, in Monadnock region, Greater Manchester, and the Greater Seacoast area. We were able to gather 50 employer insights from 44 different companies. And the topics that we talked about included public education as well as childcare and and housing. So, of course, all these issues that we know, workforce issues that employers are really concerned about right now. From those employer insights, we synthesized all those down and gave it back to employers. So we held a few webinars after the fact and spoke with businesses to validate what it was that we were hearing, to ensure that when we wrote our roundtable reports, that they were really reflective of the things that we were hearing and the things that our businesses were telling us. From there, during the validation process, it broke my nonprofit heart to have them tell me, "You have all the data, now just write it. I don't want to co-write this together," which is what, of course, a lot of us in the nonprofit space know and love is co-creating together. They said, "You have the data, we gave you all the information. Now go ahead and write us the action. What is it that we need to do from here?" And so from there, we were able to write 6 business-friendly narratives, what it means for New Hampshire to be business-friendly, expanding on traditional definitions here. And then at our policy forum, we gave those narratives to the business community and gave them a big black marker and said, write on it, scribble, whatever it is that you need to do to make it yours and to make sure that we're saying the right things here. And after many iterations and many different inputs, we launched the business friendly narrative campaign in June, where we had one shared message that really centered the business voice on this idea of what it means for New Hampshire to be business friendly. And the arrow continues because we're continuing on with this webinar series and really identifying deep level for each of the individual issues that businesses we know care about today, about what those things look like. So diving in very specifically for the public education roundtable report that we have, employers told us that there are some things that are needed to build strong schools, and that they want to build strong schools, and schools recruit and keep talent. We heard a lot about different employees leaving places to find better schools for their children. And that we also heard that they're concerned about the quality of the education and whether or not they're getting work ready students coming out of our public education system and even beyond. Some employers mentioned recent hires, recent graduates struggling with really basic math skills and deep concern for that career and technical education that builds the next workforce. There's been much defunding of the CTE system in New Hampshire currently, and there's been lots of turnover and lots of change, and it's been difficult for employers to maintain those CTE connections that they had previously had very strong relationships with. Fair funding that eases the property tax squeeze is something we heard a lot. And I think that's why we had such high engagement in these roundtables about how individuals, business owners even, are being impacted by the property tax squeeze that is occurring because of how New Hampshire funds its public education system. And you'll hear more about that later. We also have communities where families put down roots and a business community ready to lead is one thing that we heard here. So, what employers are saying, I don't need a 0.05% business tax deduction if that tax money helps my employees. It's an investment in the community. And that is our segue into really centering our guest speaker here, David Finnerty from Claremont Savings Bank, the president and CEO, who I had the pleasure of meeting very recently and really exemplifies everything that it is that we're about to talk about here. So, welcome, David, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and pin you so everybody can see you here in the center.
Oh, that's
But
exciting.
And so I want to have a conversation, an open, honest conversation with you here, and I have some questions for you. So, but very first and foremost, I want you to tell us a bit about your business and what made you build it here in New Hampshire. Of course, you came in 3 years ago to Claremont Savings Bank, but what drew you here, and specifically, what do public schools make possible for you as a business and a member of the community?
Sure. So Claremont Savings Bank, those who don't know, we're a mutual community savings bank. So we are 119 years old. So we planted roots in 1907 here in New Hampshire, in Claremont. And one of the things about a mutual that I've really enjoyed and attracted me to come up to this position is how mutuals look at the community itself. Right. And it really is a saying we have out there is when our communities thrive, we thrive. When we thrive, our communities thrive. And I think that is very telling because you can take that very same statement and put it in this topic today. I think when our schools thrive, our communities thrive, businesses thrive. It's a very kind of mutually beneficial cycle. So what I enjoyed in coming up, especially in New Hampshire in this area, is I saw all the opportunity that is this in the state. It has really great people, a great business environment that gets, I'll say, is very authentic in how they believe the values of the school systems, in housing, and healthcare, and how they all come together to make what I'll say vibrant communities work. And I see an opportunity to really help that in the state, starting with where we are here in Claremont, expanding out. But I think the school part is critical. And I've seen that from where I've been. Grew up in New York. I've lived in Connecticut for the last probably 30 odd years. And I've watched how school systems have taken communities that were possibly old farm towns, old manufacturing firms, and the investment in the education in the school system, exactly what Tiffany has been saying. It drew families in, it drew businesses in, it expanded businesses, and you watch just blooming communities come from that. And then the businesses are the benefactors of that as much as helping aid into the growth as well. So long answer to a short question, but that's why I do what I do, and I think this is a great topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Him and I were giggling a little bit when we first met and joking about how he's still acclimating to New Hampshire, but he is very clear on where people stand with him, which is wonderful and different and unique to New Hampshire culture. So a lot of great things to know about New Hampshire. So would love to hear, if you wouldn't mind, when we call education a workforce issue, it can sound a little bit abstract. And so I wonder if you have any concrete moments or direct stories where the school system showed up directly in your business in Claremont Savings Bank.
Sure. I can give you some very specific instances how has it showed up for the bank. But I think being part of the bank and the community bank and talking with our local businesses, what their challenges are, talking with nonprofits, talking with community members and community leaders, it really gets into how do you make that community thrive. So very specifically for the bank, being up in Claremont, it's a little bit of a rural area. So for us to really grow, and we want to grow our business and we want to bring in that workforce, you need that quality education for two things. You need it to prepare those up and coming generations to be able to enter the workforce and succeed in the workforce, because we want to help them grow. And I think the more our schools prepare them for that, the more successful the businesses are, because they're bringing in the right talent. And that then helps the community be successful. So it turns into economic development. And when I look at it from the business lens and talking with businesses, the challenge they have is one of the things their employees are looking for. And again, it was talked about here earlier, is there's a couple of factors in how they attract talent. Schools are one of them. Housing is another. Healthcare is one. Those pieces. And the families are looking for a good school system, good education, because they want that. They want to know they're providing the best course for their children and their children's future. But if that is not there, then what they're finding out is that workforce isn't growing. So then the businesses who want to expand are finding out it's harder to attract the talent in. And in our conversations, their challenge is they're kind of stealing from one another. And in stealing from one another, they have to up price in doing that. So it's actually making it harder for them to grow and be profitable and expand, to have more opportunities for more folks, because of, I would say, the nature of one of the pieces, that school system not allowing or drawing in that talent, having it family and business friendly. And I know we'll talk about that later, but that is a significant challenge. And if the businesses find it challenging to get workforce, retain workforce, bring that in a skilled workforce, that hampers their ability to grow. And at some point, they just have to make an economic decision that hopefully they stay. But if they do leave, and some of the larger ones, it is very impactful to that community. So the schools play a pivotal part in that.
Thank you, David. And I saw a lot of nodding heads about the businesses stealing from each other as far as the workforce is concerned. And I think especially rural communities see that and they feel that so tangibly. And I love that you bring such an interesting perspective as not only a business, as somebody in business, but also you work with businesses on economic development. So it's such a really tangible perspective that you bring. So I appreciate that so much. And I'd love to ask you to talk about the economic development of it and all the benefits and all the things. But I'd love to know also too, we had that quote just prior here about I don't need a business tax deduction. I can plan for that. If that investment helps the community, then it's an investment in my employees. And I'd love to know about how you weigh that trade-off. And when you're thinking about investment in schools, clearly means public money, public funding through state revenue or local revenue. So how, as a business, do you weigh that trade-off of your business taxes and the cost of that versus the cost of not investing in those things?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think if I had to oversimplify the answer and then explain it a little bit from there, it really is a difference between a short game outlook and a long game outlook. If you think about it, yes, it'd be great to have less taxes and cut that. But as the old saying goes, are you cutting off your nose to spite your face in the long term? So yeah, short term, it's great. You get a little bit of a relief. But what people don't see is the long-term impacts into the business, into our business, for instance, is that reinvestment back into the community is what allows the groundwork, the principle, the foundation for that community to begin to grow and thrive. And as communities thrive and become places people want to go, want to live, want to be a part of, and embrace the values of that and give back into the community, then all boats rise when you do that. I use this analogy a lot with us as a mutual bank. And for those, please, we want your accounts, but this is how we get at this. We talk to folks and we talk to businesses, and the way we view this, and I think it's very similar to the school system and for businesses with this tax. I don't have to have your business. What I need for you to do is be educated enough and help you and set you up so that you are successful in our community. So you add to the success of the community. And then indirectly, I'm going to do well just because of that. I don't need to win directly. And I think when you look at this statement here, those who have made that comment is I don't need the 0.05%. They get that. You're reinvesting into a long-term, mutually beneficial cycle that will pay itself off come generations. And that's how you build sustainability and relevance and vibrancy long-term. I think for those who have more of that shorter look, it doesn't quite align with what I say that value system is.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much, David. And really speaks to, I think I've heard that for most business owners. They're always forward thinking, right? And they're always thinking about how am I going to be around in 10, 15, 20, 100 years from now? And that's really the goal for, I would say, most businesses. They want to stay around and keep making profit. So, and I'd really love to dig into, I had mentioned it earlier, but if in your perspective, being both a member of the community, but also operating a business in the community, what happens if nothing changes? What happens if we stay on the course and public education remains what it is or continues to get worse? Or on the flip side, what opens up for your business if we do get it right, if we make those positive changes?
No, that's a great way of looking at it. And I think if you're asking the right questions. Is everyone says you got to make a decision. Well, doing nothing is a decision, whether you want to believe it or not. And it has impact. It has consequences. On the other side, I love the other piece of that is asking the question is, what happens if we get it all right? You have to ask that question because that creates that vision, that the value prop to move it forward. I think if you do nothing and you look at just some of the demographic numbers in New Hampshire, New England across the U.S., we are an aging population. Okay, our unfortunate our death rates are outnumbering our birth rates. Right, so that's never great for a state or an economy or a region. So you need to attract talent to come in to want to live here, and in that you kind of turn that tide. And I think that's what you're looking for. Is you want one where you flip those numbers, where it is positive growth rate, and people do want to hear they see opportunity. They see they can be successful not only for their generation but the next generation and the next generation, and then you create kind of a generational value system in your state where people want to come, they want to stay, families want to stay. And that drives, I believe, the state forward. It helps the state grow, it helps the state remain relevant. Schools are a huge part of that because families make decisions based on what is the quality of education as well as, housing. Can I get a house? That's another critical thing in there, right? And in healthcare. But those three legs of the stool are critical to, I say, the future growth of New Hampshire and the vibrancy of the businesses within it, because that will allow them to continue to grow, to have the workforces. And I would say the more efficient and effective workforces that drive them, make them more profitable, which that in turn can go back into the very communities themselves, which are investing in the environment that allows future growth. So it's a big mutual circle.
I love that answer. And you take such the long view and really think about the economics of it and what it you can really see tangibly what it means for your business when you explain it that way. So I really appreciate your viewpoint there and um, would love to think a little more positively. Let's leave off on a positive note for the last question here is talking about a lot of employers are working to solve issues of public education in their community. If folks didn't know, Claremont public schools have been in the news a little bit, and there's been a lot that's happened in that community. So I'd love to hear how the community has come together to solve some public education issues in your community and where you already see momentum worth building on.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about that. So for those who didn't know, last year there was a little issue in the Claremont School District. And I think for me personally, it was probably the proudest moment I've had being a community banker was as that was going through and we were kind of sitting back, letting kind of the initial hit of that go. And we really just kind of reached out to school system and said, hey, listen, we know you're dealing with a lot, but the second you know what you need, just walk across the street and come find us. Because in this, we knew and we had a lot of support, businesses, individual community members, nonprofits, everyone was behind this, saying, we cannot let this happen, right? To let the school system not open, to do that to the students, to the teachers was unfathomable. So that is where we had stepped in with our loan, which was great because we actually wound up being able to grant or actually donate even the interest back. So it really became a 0% interest loan for them. Donating for us, it was $100,000, but the businesses stepped up, the community members stepped up to take care of all of those extracurricular activities from the elementary schools right through the high school over to the tech school. And when I see that, that tells me everyone believes in what we're talking about right here. There is momentum. What I think we need to do, and the businesses are a great place because businesses have an amazing voice, galvanize on that momentum and that we cannot let the schools fail because those are our kids. That is the future of the communities. That is the future people going into the workforces who are driving the health and vibrancy of the communities going forward. We just need to come together and have what I say is a singular voice and more advocacy. You hear advocacy all over and you see it. But I think from what I've seen, at least in my time in New Hampshire, some of that has been a little disjointed, at least on the educational piece. But if the community members, the nonprofits, and the businesses came together, that is a powerful voice that it has a story to tell and has to be heard. And maybe what was, I would say, kind of an unfortunate thing that happened in the Claremont School District can be a galvanizing moment to keep some of that momentum going. Because I'm sure that's not the only story out there to tell.
Amazing. Thank you, David, and you have some thank yous in the chat too for, for participating and being part of that effort. And really, I think that what you say about the idea that so many businesses got behind this whole effort really speaks to how businesses know and can see that public schools are really important for their economic prosperity as well as the community and how it really interplays. So you couldn't have put it any better way, honestly. It was such a pleasure to have you. I hope that you are able to stay on for the rest of it and hang out with us here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my slides again, and we'll have opportunity to also chat with David some more too in sort of our discussion time. But we'll move along here. To the next part of the programming. I saw some questions on like, okay, cool, what do we do about it? So we're going to get into that in a little bit here, but wanted to talk about the narrative, talk about what is business friendly. Just a quick review of the overall business friendly narrative, because we do have the overarching business friendly narrative, but we also have business friendly in terms of public schools. So business friendly and how it's been defined through talking with businesses, and this is us translating from business and validating with businesses that when people thrive, businesses thrive. And what that looks like is investment in people and places that is supported by policy and culture. And embedded in all of this here is all of the issues that we care about, right? Housing, climate, energy, workforce, childcare, public education, taxes, regulation, all that is wrapped up in how we prioritize these things and what that looks like, how we get there in our culture. And today we're going to we're going to zoom in on public education specifically. So the narrative on public education here that we have is when public education works, New Hampshire works. I'll say it again. When public education works, New Hampshire works. This is a narrative that I hope you could use. It's easy to continue to repeat as well. And we know that the traditional definition of business friendly, what a lot of people think of is taxes and regulation solely, but we know that there's the interplay of all of these other aspects. Like I had said here in this slide here, all of these other aspects are really included in that definition and need to expand to include all those things. So when public education is concerned, public education, economically speaking, develops and draws talent. And what we're working towards and what we need is graduating the highly skilled workers that employers need and drawing world-class talent. Again, develop and drawing talent to New Hampshire. And so that rests on 4 pillars here. We have funding, public education funding. Every school has what it needs when it needs it. Educators, there are great educators in every single classroom, support where every student can succeed, and pathways from classroom to career. Again, these are all things that we heard during our roundtables that are really important to be able to have successful public schools and successful businesses in New Hampshire. And when one of these pillars is off kilter here or not part of the equation entirely, then the whole thing kind of falls apart. You can't have a business-friendly New Hampshire in terms of public education without each of these things in place. And so to talk about each of these individual pillars, I want to invite some speakers to give us just a really brief overview of kind of where we're coming from first for each of these pillars. So I'd love to invite Zach Sheehan from New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project to walk us through the funding situation a little bit here in New Hampshire. So go ahead, take it away, Zach.
Great. Hey, everyone. My name is Zach Sheehan. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project. We are a 4-person nonprofit based in Concord. Been around for about 6 years, but have some relationships and founding board members that go back 3, 4, 5 decades working in and around issues of school funding and tax fairness. We primarily work on 2 sides of the same coin. So talking about how our state and local governments fund public schools in New Hampshire, the impact on property taxes, and how to make that better overall. At a really high level, the work we do is a lot of education around how schools are funded, But we generally believe that, as Tiffany, said, we're very lined up with the work that's come out of NHBSR and these roundtables that, every student, regardless of where they live or their income, should have access to an excellent education. And a lot of the work we do is grounded in working with other organizations, people, community partners, businesses, school board members, teachers, parents, to try to talk about what is unique about our individual towns and communities and what we share across the state. So I'm gonna just do real high level, kind of like what's the state of play for funding in New Hampshire. Um, I have like 3 slides and they're all pretty depressing. So before I start with that, I just want to start with like the reminder that in New Hampshire, on average, we have really good public schools. Kind of however you want to look at the metrics, we have very high scoring, high ranking, really good, excellent outcomes for a lot of our public schools, but those averages hide some pretty dramatic discrepancies from some of the districts that have the lowest number of resources, least access to things like property wealth. Might lose a lot of their teachers each year because they're unable to compete with higher paying neighboring districts. So with that caveat, high level breakdown. This pie chart is one of the ones that we use all the time. Really is just showing the revenue going into public schools. So we spent in the most recently available data. This is all data from New Hampshire Department of Education and our Department of Revenue Administration. Spent about $4 billion on public education, which is for a small state a lot of money. We do invest a lot in our public education system. The big caveat is who is the we in that statement? Largely, property taxes are what fund our public education system. About 70%, which is the largest share of any state in the country by a lot. On the flip side, the state only kicks in about 20% of the total public education dollars, which is the smallest share in the country by a lot. That little blue part that is labeled swept is technically a state tax, but it's raised and retained locally. I'm not going to get into that because that's a discussion for another day, but it is treated and currently operates as a local property tax, which is why we lump it in there. All right, can you go to the next slide, please? So how has that shifted over time? A lot of what we talk about and also hear relative to the discussions about how to change these systems, it's important to have a historical perspective. So just looking back to 2008, this is just kind of showing the increase in responsibility, just dollar amounts for just the local and state. And in this state, we are giving, in this graph, we're giving the state credit for SWEP for those of you tracking that. So as you can see, kind of over the past 17 years, we've increased the amount we're spending on public education, as with a lot of other industries, a lot of other costs. But who is paying for that increase is by far local property taxes, almost doubling how much we're investing in that from about 1.4 billion to 2.6 billion, while the state, and this is something you will hear a lot, the state, yes, is technically spending more dollars on public education than it ever has before. That's not really a helpful statement because many things are more expensive now than they ever have been, if just a pure dollar amount in a void. And so looking at kind of who is paying for the increase, it largely has been local property taxes. Just for reference, that's an 18% increase in the state's contribution versus a 91% increase in the local contribution. And this local increase is in every type and shade of community across the state, from rural, urban, heavily conservative to heavily liberal to purple from a political perspective. So kind of every community is looking at this same trend. Next slide, please. One thing I will point out, one kind of getting into the weeds a little bit about tax rates, because I think this goes to a central point that we're talking through, which is, how should we be spending our money? And to go to kind of what David was saying earlier, if we invest locally, what happens? And what are the decisions we're making locally? And what are the impacts? So this is tax rates for education over time since 1996. And the reason I have this one is I want to highlight the shift in 1999 to 2000, which is where you see that first green bar. And we dropped from $17 to $13 on average. The reason this is important is because that was when the state instituted a statewide education property tax. So a new tax, people are paying a new property tax to the state. And they also increased the amount of funding they were sending to local communities. And the result was overall across the state, people had lower property tax rates, even accounting for this huge new, the green bar, new property tax. And so communities got more money than ever before. More communities that had low property values and were really struggling got even more money, so taking into account their need. And a lot of them, what they did is they passed that additional money on as tax savings to local property taxpayers. And so I pulled this out because we're having a lot of discussion right now in this policy world about all taxes are additive. And if you add a tax, everyone pays more. And we have an example in New Hampshire, a very New Hampshire specific example from not that long ago of the dramatic opposite, where if you raise taxes, but pair that with intentional and smart funding and changing where the money's going and why, people at the local level made decisions to best help their community to both support schools and relieve pressure on property taxes. Again, I can go way more into this, but just a helpful piece of historical context. And then the last slide is just kind of helping show, this is not our data, it's a national group, that in New Hampshire, in general, we have what's called a regressive tax system. So the more money you make, the smaller percentage of your income goes to taxes, really driven by property taxes. And this takes into account rent, actually. And so property taxes really are kind of fueling the inability for people to afford kind of overall everyday things. And we see that not only just in the school side, but the municipal side too. And so to kind of end on a, hopefully a future-oriented piece, a lot of what we advocate for and what we want to see in New Hampshire is when we're making decisions about tax policy, we should be looking towards the visions and the values that we have, which is who is paying and taking that into account. We think that tax changes and policies should be taking into account people who are making, the lower middle income paying less, right? There are ways to do that with rebates or certain programs. So really making sure that as we're talking about changing tax policy, we're very clear about who's going to pay more, because some people will. Some businesses, some high wealth individuals, depends how you structure the taxes, might pay more, but we should take into account who then will benefit, who will pay less, and be very clear about that, and really try to help folks that are struggling the most. So hopefully that was a helpful overview, and we do this in an hour normally, so happy to dig in more, and we'll be doing this around the state this fall. So thanks for bearing with me.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Zach. I really appreciate you speaking to all of that. And I'll pass it right over to Kelly Unti from Reaching Higher New Hampshire, and she'll walk us through the rest of the pillars.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kelly, and I am from Reaching Higher New Hampshire. I am about to speed walk you through some of the biggest topics in public education in New Hampshire. And like Zach, I want to stipulate, I could do an hour, I could do 2 or 3 hours on each of these topics. But instead, what I'm going to do is respond directly to one of the comments in the chat earlier and give you sort of 3 data points for each of these NHBSR pillars that can help inform and shape how you think about public education relative to your business interests. And I challenge you to think about each of these data points that I give you from both the perspective of how it's impacting your ability to find and recruit new talent, and simultaneously how you're able to retain your current employees, whether with the idea that your employees are parts of families that have children in them. So diving into the pillar relative to educators and teaching, I think we all have a general idea of what educators in our public education system do, but know that no matter how long ago you graduated from school, this job has grown increasingly complex and increasingly in size. A few fast facts about our teaching workforce here in New Hampshire. There's approximately 14,000 classroom teachers in the state. Teaching is actually one of our larger workforce pools. The average starting salary for those teachers is around $44,000 a year. Currently, our average teacher salary, which ranks 25th in the nation, sidebar, we all live in New Hampshire, and we know that our cost of living is not in the middle of the pack. So the average salary for our teachers is in the middle of the pack at $69,000 a year. And just a really stunning stat for you to keep in mind here is that between the 22-23 and 24-25 school year, we lost almost 7% of our educator workforce. They left. And they left for a couple reasons. They left because of pay and benefits and the ability to just sustain a better, more sustainable life through another role. The other reason that they left is that, as I sort of alluded to at the outset, their job is getting really hard. And if you talk to any educators, you will know that, like many things, the pandemic really changed the entire world that our teachers live in, and what their classrooms look like. So I'll pivot to our next pillar, which is around how our educators are engaging in their classrooms, how they're supporting their students. One word as I do this, in addition to the other facts I'm going to give you, we've had some really robust conversations over the past couple years in New Hampshire about varying we use the word pathways in this presentation in a different space, but alternatives to public education. And I think that sometimes the passion and the volume of those conversations has really drowned out the fact that still 9 in 10 New Hampshire youth go to public school. The vast majority of them are public school students. We're actually talking in the neighborhood of 180,000 kids engage in this system, and their families are connected to it. So when we're thinking about how we interact with and support our students, I mentioned that educators' jobs are getting more complicated. Everyone knows that you are at your best when you come to work prepared, focused, and ready to engage. And unfortunately, many of our students are not coming through the door in the morning ready to engage in growth and learning. There are other aspects of their life that need to be attended to so that they're able to engage with academics. So a few facts for you to keep in mind. 1 in 5 New Hampshire public school students qualify for free or reduced price meals. That means that these are students coming from low-income backgrounds, precarious living situations, and they may not be having all of their physiological needs met prior to showing up at school. Additionally, 1 in 6 of our students receive special education services through an IEP or an individualized education program. This number has been growing over the years. It's important to know that special education is both legally mandated. All of your public schools have to provide these services, and the services that are provided, obviously, to someone with an individualized education plan costs more. So it drives up the costs of providing daily services by making sure that we're meeting these students at where they're at, so that we're both addressing those physiological needs and those psychological needs as well. One other thing that's also a growing trend here in the state, because of another topic that you will engage with NHBSR on, 1 in 50 of our public school students, and again, we have 180,000 in the state, 1 in 50 of those kiddos is experiencing homelessness. And when you don't have a home, it makes it hard to do homework. And when you don't have a home, it makes it hard to stay focused on whatever the lesson is of the day. So we have teachers who are working super hard. They're showing up, they're engaging to the best of their ability. They're doing it under really challenging working conditions. They're doing it for very little pay and very little reward. They're engaging with students with super complex needs. that are driving the way they are able to engage with their education. And I saw it flash up, so I'm going to pause for a second and I'm going to let Zach talk a little bit about those costs for special education.
All right, I'm back with one more pie chart. So this is the total amount that our whole public education system spends on special education services, which, as Kelly just flagged, are both critically important and legally required, and we know provide benefits to students who aren't even receiving those services as well. So having them in the school benefits everyone in that public school. So in short, this chart is just a more dramatic version of the total education spend. The state kicks in a very small amount for special education services. The federal government kicks in an even smaller amount. We've never lived up to the amount that was originally proposed in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, otherwise known as IDEA. And really the kind of gut piece of this is that students who receive these services end up being kind of the focal point of local battles, because sometimes these services can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's kind of rare, but they are more expensive. And if you move into a community, a small town in New Hampshire, everyone knows who that child or that family is. And the only way to pay for that, because the state continues to reduce the amount actually that they're contributing to special education, is to raise local property taxes. And the fact that we have a system that incentivizes kind of this tension locally is one of the key kind of examples I use as a reason for why it is broken. So just there's a lot more to dig into there, but relative to the whole education funding piece, special education is kind of an extreme element of that, where the lack of state funding puts even more pressure on local property taxes.
Another very specialized service that our public education system aims to provide are those sorts of varied job-based or work-based education services that help prepare our students to make the leap from K-12 education to either post-secondary schooling or directly to the workforce. We have, as a state, over time had varying interest in investing in this system. There are many, many aspects of it, but one of the ones that Tiffany referenced earlier that comes up quite a bit is our CTE system. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. It really is the crown jewel for the way our public education system is hoping to engage with and partner with you all in the business sector. There are currently 26 regional CTE centers across the state. You see them on the map now here. Depending on the programming that they are offering at each of these centers, the investment necessary in those programs needs to be sometimes significantly more than a traditional public education would receive. There's currently about 12,000 students in these centers across the state, and they're engaging in a wide array of programs. I'm going to rattle off a couple here because I pulled the list yesterday and it was sort of fun to think about. Aviation and drone technology, forestry and arboriculture, marine technology, line workers and electrical utility technicians, veterinary, the list goes on and on. Those programs do cost more to deliver because of specialized equipment, specialized teaching staff. And so on average, a 2-year CTE program costs about $8,000 more than standard-based classroom instruction. So I just wanted to throw that out for you all to sort of get a sense of how that's playing in the public education system. At the end of the day, our mission is much like Zach's mission, is much like the mission of the team at New Hampshire Business for Social Responsibility, which is to make New Hampshire as strong as it can possibly be. We need a strong business community in order to do that. And in order to have a strong business community, we need that pipeline that both creates our employees of tomorrow and helps to retain the families that are here today. And with that, I'll turn it back to Tiffany.
Awesome. Thank you so much for our speakers that were joining us today, and for giving us that amazing overview of the four pillars of what a business-friendly public education system would look like in New Hampshire. We went through funding and educators, support and pathways. And really, at the end of the day, business-friendly, actually, Kelly already said it, business-friendly New Hampshire develops our future talent, but also draws in talent with the public education system that we're able to offer them. So that is the definition, which is great, wonderful. Now what? And this was I hope that the person that asked, like, now what, is still here. I know some folks had to jump off for the 1 o'clock hours. I hope you can hang with us here while we talk about, okay, cool. So what do we do with all this wonderful information? So we have a business action menu specifically for public education, and we have these different menu items that have menus to each of them. So I'll walk through each of these individually to really talk about these tangible actions that you can take. The very, very, very first and foremost thing that you can do, and it answers this question that we had in the chat earlier, is use the narrative, talk about it, talk to legislators, talk to businesses, talk in the school settings, talk with the different school boards and all of these different meetings that you might attend. Talk about what it means for New Hampshire to be business friendly. Use the definition, use the narrative, talk about the four pillars. Talk about it. And that is the way you can just amplify this messaging. And what we're really trying to create, like the pie in the sky to me, is that our candidates that are running for office this coming election season are repeating this language, this business-friendly New Hampshire. They're talking about public education. They're talking about childcare, housing, climate resilience, and readiness, as well as clean energy. All these things that make New Hampshire a place where businesses can really thrive because their communities are thriving and the environment is thriving, and it's affordable to be here. So talk about it, share about it publicly. We have a business friendly messaging and kit. All of this is open source. This business friendly logo here, you can go right to our website and you can download it and you can co-brand it. You can use it however it is that you like. We want people to use it. We don't care about credit. You can just go ahead and use it, because this is, if you do nothing else, just take this away, this nugget, and just talk about it. So if you didn't know, if you didn't hear it, talk about it. The next thing that you can do is advocate, help to shape education policy. You can join NHBSR has an advocacy committee. You can learn more about that through me. I'm the one that facilitates that meeting. You can come to these meetings. We have them once a month, perhaps a little bit more during the legislative session, where you can inform not only public education policy through your business lens, but also other policy that's going to affect your businesses as well. You can go to Concord and testify. You can submit written testimony. All of these things I can support you in. You don't have to go to endless meetings to be a part of. If you sign up for our email list and our advocacy list, especially right on our main page of our website, then I can send you information when there's moments that you can speak out about public education policy. And then, of course, you can engage with these trusted partners that came here today to talk to you. Reaching Higher New Hampshire, thank you, Kelly, and New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project, Zach, as well as, I'm sure most people have heard of, the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute, which is an amazing resource that puts out nonpartisan and analysis and information about the economic impacts of a lot of these different issues, but especially public education. You can partner to expand career pathways. You can offer learnings with hands-on learning to students, both through internships, but even as early as just job shadowing for high school students, or even middle school, if that's something that is being seek out. But seek out your local schools and see what the opportunities are to partner there. You can also seek out programs like New Hampshire Scholars that connect you to these opportunities. They have pathways that bring you right into the schools and do mentorships, and you can do different different speaking opportunities and go into the schools to talk about your industry and your business. You can build an apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship programs. You can partner with Apprenticeship New Hampshire for that. And then you can also serve on a career and technical education advisory board across the state. And again, connecting in with our partners like Reaching Higher can help you connect to those resources. You can invest. Everybody loves to ask business for money, so I hear you with I'm sure everybody is, but these are just opportunities that are where if you as a business decide that public education is a priority for you, these are places where you can strengthen student opportunity. So you can seek community projects that expand opportunities for young people in your local community. If you reach out to the local school, I'm sure they would love any support that you can give them. But really specifically sponsoring programs that help build these skills that are really important to employers, like music and art programming and sports and all of these things that are being defunded because they have to start somewhere when the funding is short. You can also give to scholarship programs like New Hampshire Community Colleges Foundation, as well as resource specific equipment and materials and programs through regional career and technical education centers, as well as school districts. And then you can also get involved. You can show up at these local school board meetings and budget committee meetings and all of that. But you could also, as a business, serve on these different committees or support your staff in participating in those. And Michaela Demeter is on this meeting. She's from New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project, and she has a great group of school board she runs a group of school board folks that are a great resource across the state as well. And oops, I went backwards. Here we are. So these are the actions that you can participate in. Yes, I will make these slides available so you can click on all those links that were in the slides as well. What is next for everything that we're working on here to build this business-friendly narrative? We have had the public education webinar today. Wonderful. Thank you for coming. We'll have the childcare focused public business-friendly narrative in August, one on housing, energy, and climate as well in the following months. You can also you can go ahead and register for any of those through this link right here. If you wouldn't mind either Zena or Debbie helping me drop the registration link in the chat so that folks can access it. But you can also use the QR code. We also have all these resources, as I mentioned, on our website. So you can download, again, the logo and the narrative and how to use it and all of the kit and information on action as well. So all of those will be there along with the recording of this meeting. So before you go, I know the breakout rooms is a dirty word. I'm not going to say breakout rooms. We're going to stay in one room together here. And this is the part of the meeting that we really start to engage in wrestle. So I want to hear from all of you that you have been here. You've been listening to everything that we've been talking about here. And so I have some kind of pointed questions for you. But also happy to hear just anything that is top of mind for you here. So in this group here, I will stop the recording before we start this little Q&A. So before I do that, I want to say thanks for coming and thanks for tuning in, the folks watching the recording. So I'm going to stop the recording here. And